Hey everyone, it's Gem Warrior, and I wanted to make another video, um, as I did a few days back about my goddess Vivian. I wanted to make another video in that vein about another god that I work with and that I love so much. Because I think most of us like to make videos about our gods and about our spirits that we work with because it's a way for us to honor them and and to share them with other people in light in the light of how we see them, which is sometimes different from how other people see the same God. So I'm reading again from the Encyclopedia of Spirits, which I've praised a bajillion times by now. I've had it since it came out in whatever time it came out, like 2009 or something. It's a fantastic book, and you should really check it out. There's a companion book I think I've also mentioned before that was written after this by Judica Isles called the Encyclopedia of Spells, and it has like over 10,000 or 5,000 spells. Like, it's massive like this. And it's just purely spells. So you should check that out too if you're very interested. Although, I am kind of interested to see what she's up to now. But anywho, let's read. I'm going to read the passage on Odin, who I talked about in another video, a couple of videos about being like a father figure to me. Or a grandfather, or some type of masculine influence. As usual, I'm drinking during this video, drinking some sweet tea. So, forgive my pauses if you hate when people drink on film. I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all. So, when I watch people who drink while they're making a video, I think it just adds to the authenticity and the very casual vibe that I like to present, which is why I don't worry about lighting and editing and things like that. Okay, so Odin. I'm going to just read it right out like I did in the Lady of the Lake video, and then kind of interject with my own experiences from there, probably. So we all know Odin. He really doesn't need much explanation. And unfortunately, Odin has been associated with like skinheads and radical extremist, like racial people, like racial extremists. Radical racialists? Racists, I mean? Oh, that's so weird to say. It's hard to mix. Anywho, you know what I'm saying. Anyway, I think that that's unfortunate, the correlation of Odin and the path of Asatru and heathenry. A lot of like northern deities and northern magic has been associated, particularly here in the American South, with Odin and with, Odin and such have been associated with like racism because some organized racist groups use their symbols and use the gods' names and stuff, and it's so ridiculous, so ridiculous. So just know that I do not like that, and that I do not approve of those correlations in any way, and neither do I think the people of those faiths and the faiths themselves. Anywho, and despite the historical evidence that some people try to push around, that the Vikings, Anglo-Saxons, the Goths, and all these Nordic peoples and such, the fact that they try to push out this evidence that they too were very racist, it, it just completely isn't true in my opinion, and that it just, when people try to throw out historical evidence that isn't truly historical evidence, it just totally negates, I think, what they're trying to say. Like, if you're a racist and that's who you are and that's what you're going to claim to be, you don't really have to back it up for anyone, okay? Just say it. Just say what you are and just stand by what you are. Anywho, this isn't that kind of video or this kind of channel. So, let's get into Odin. Let's see. This is what it says. Odin, and it's spelled Odin, of course, but it says also known as Odin, which is spelled Odhinn. That's the way I spell it personally when I am journaling about him. I just like that spelling. I like adding H's to things, which is a very modern thing to do. Like the Morrigan is usually spelled, Morrigan, sometimes with an accent mark above the A. I like to spell it Morrighan, which came much later in English language. So it's thusly that. It's the English language, not the traditional Gaelic, like for the Morgan and such. But anywho, I like to add the H and the two N's into Odin just because it's fun and it's different and I like it. Wotan, or Woden, which is arguably a completely different god. Um, that's kind of like the equations of Greek and Roman gods, although I think this is to a much lesser extent, because you really could convincingly argue that Wotan and Odin are the same. So Wotan, Woden, and Old One Eye, because he is missing an eye. We'll get to that. Other titles include the Allfather, Glory Bearer, the Raven Lord, and the Master of the Gallows. Ooh. So, Odin is the leader of the Aesir spirits, Lord of Asgard. So yes, there are two races of gods in Nordic mythology / Anglo-Saxon mythology. But for this video, I'll probably just call it all Nordic. So when I say Nordic, I mean all these surrounding areas. So much like the Celts, you had what are they called? The Firbolgs, I think, were the original gods of the land of like Ireland specifically, and then the Tuatha De Danann or Danann came in and took over. It's much like the Olympians too in Greek mythology. You have the Olympians, which are a race of gods, like these holier than thou gods, but then you have these lesser gods that aren't considered Olympians. So most mythologies have at least two races of gods, which are metaphors for the races of people and things like that, as I think most of mythology and gods are. So anyway, he's the leader of the Aesir spirits. We don't hear too much about the Vanir, which is the other group. A lot of it's been lost to history, but we do have the gods Freyr and Freya, which are the twin gods. Also, you find those in mythology a lot. Every mythology has twin gods, usually males and a male and a female, but which are also usually lovers. But you have Freyr and Freya, who are from the Vanir, and they're absorbed into the Aesir gods. But I digress. So he's the Lord of Asgard. So, again, if we're doing comparative mythology here, almost every mythology has this idea that the gods are so much like us. They're very human-like. They just have these amazing powers and these forces of nature that they control. Other than that, they're very human, and they seem to have complex emotions and drama, which is why it's so easy for us to learn from them and to feel drawn to them and things like that. But no, he is the Lord of Asgard. So again, this is like he's the king of the gods. The idea that even they have laws and order and structure, much like Zeus is the king of the Olympian gods, or the Dagda is like the leader or the king of the Celtic gods. Odin is the king. Devotion to Odin once spread across the entire Germanic and Norse world. Spirit of oh, okay, that was the sentence. All right. Spirit of war, wisdom, and death. Odin is the lord of ecstasy, shamanism, and esoteric wisdom. He's a patron of poetry, magic, and the heroic dead. Yes, specifically the heroic dead. We'll get into that with the Valkyries in a minute, but he is very much a non-traditional masculine god, even for these ancient people. In today's terms, he is definitely an unconventionally masculine god. He has so many attributes to him that are feminine, not masculine. Which is funny because, again, like these skinheads and these overly aggressive macho types love Odin. And they're like, oh, hell yeah, Odin. But he's actually an extremely feminine god, even to these people back then. He did rule over things that were considered at the time to be women's arts and women's mysteries, like poetry, and forms of shamanism, which we'll get into too. He was not a aggressive type A kind of person. And I love him for that, because I'm not that kind of person either. The word God, like the word God, okay, which in German is Gott, G-O-T-T, may derive from one of Odin's epithets. So that's pretty cool if we actually got the word God, which is obviously so important in the English language and in all of the English-speaking worlds. If we actually got that from Odin, that's fucking badass. He may be a deified hero and ancestor. Myths, for instance, the Volsung saga, source material from Wagner's Ring Cycle, describe Odin as the ancestor of heroes. He is the progenitor of royal families. England's Saxon kings claim descent from him. Okay, there's a lot in that one paragraph. So, that I want to talk about. So he may be a deified hero and ancestor. Yes, a lot of people, well, not a lot, but some people do think that Odin is not necessarily a god, like born a god, like has always been a non-physical form, like a spirit, an entity or deity. Some people think that he was just a person, much like Gandhi, Martin Luther King. Some people say Jesus. Um, the Martin Luther King and Gandhi, at least we can point to as examples. These are people that are extremely spiritual leaders, did so much for their communities and the world, um, but aren't gods. They're just people who did amazing things. Mother Teresa, even. Um, but who's to say that they don't become gods when they died, or who's to say that thousands of years from now people won't look back at our history and think that Mother Teresa, Gandhi, and Martin Luther King um, were gods or demigods of some sort. We don't know. So some people believe that Odin truly physically existed as a person, and he was this wandering poet who just seeked to gain knowledge and share knowledge, and that was all he did. And then he died. But because of that journeying spirit and the sharing of knowledge and taking in of knowledge, he probably gained a lot of fans and followers, and people who appreciated him. And that could make him seem godlike in death. The legend, perpetuates. But anywho, so it says, for instance, the Volsung Saga. The Volsung Saga is a super, super old set of myths that were pretty much incorporated into an opera called The Ring Cycle. And then The Ring Cycle was the inspiration for J.R.R. Tolkien's whole world, the Lord of the Rings world, The Hobbit and all of that. So Gandalf, his appearance, Gandalf the Grey, later Gandalf the White, the wizard in Lord of the Rings, we're pagans, like pretty much don't have to describe that to each other, right? I think most of us like J.R.R. Tolkien in some format. But the appearance of Gandalf is almost verbatim the generic appearance that we usually get from the ancient texts describing what Odin looks like. This old man traveler. He's the archetypal wizard look. That is Odin's look. And not just Merlin. It's very much Odin too. And some people argue that Merlin came from Odin, but we could do comparative mythology all day. Let's see. He's the progenitor of royal families, and England Saxon kings claim descent from him. Yeah, there are actually a lot of gods, throughout history that people do that. People will claim divine right, basically, that a god gives them permission to be king, be it through the god coming to them in a dream or what have you, and saying you're destined to be king, giving them sovereignty. This goes back so far into our history, guys, like as humans. Celtic goddesses bestow sovereignty constantly in mythology, like the Morrigan. But a stronger way to really cement your place as a king or some kind of monarch was to say that not just that the god came to you and said, hey, yeah, you're the king, but that you're actually blood of that god. Like you're actually born from that god in some way. Today, if you go to, I think it's Sweden, it could be Switzerland, but I'm pretty sure, no, it's Sweden. If you go to Sweden's royal palace, like the royal hall, you can go down a hall and see portrait upon portrait upon portrait on both sides, all the way down, of past monarchs. And when you get to the end of the hall, it leads to an image of the god Freyr, who's the god of the elves, because the very first king claimed that he was descended from him, and that the people of Sweden themselves they were children of Freyr. So that's really cool. Odin loves women, not necessarily in the way that sounds. He's not a womanizer at all. When she says, the author here says that Odin loves women, which she'll get to, she doesn't mean that he's like a sexual predator on women. He genuinely loves women. He appreciates women and what they do for the world and for society and their roles in society and in nature, of course. Because we can't deny that women perpetuate our existence. If it wasn't for women, we wouldn't exist because they give birth to us all. But also he loves the women's point of view, and he loves the differences between men and women. He celebrates the differences that are in women. And that's really evident if you read his myths. He's not like Zeus in the sense that he's constantly going after women to have sex with him. He actually almost never has sex, actually, in his myths. Um, so he loves women, knowledge, and hospitality. Yeah, Odin does not like rudeness, and that's something that I have found personally because I can be a little rude sometimes. um, Odin does not appreciate rudeness. Like he will stomp that out the minute it starts to appear. He does not like it. Um, he's not rude back to you. He doesn't go. He doesn't bring himself that low to be rude back to you. Odin is such an open, caring, hospitable god, and he just expects you to be the same way. Um, his thirst for occult wisdom is endless. That's so true. That's his whole goal in his life and unlife. Is to just learn. Um, let's see. He willingly traded one of his eyes for a mouthful of water, just a mouthful, you guys, from the well of wisdom and knowledge. That's why he's always seen with an eye patch usually, or a squinted eye. He gave it up just for more knowledge. He always is seeking to learn, always. He never claims to know everything. He's never claimed to be a god of omniscience, like some Abrahamic gods that we know of. um, so Freya, that goddess that I was speaking of earlier, that's the twin god, goddess with the god Freyr, from another tribe of gods, another race. Freya is described as his very first teacher. So he learns from a woman. And, in the patriarchal world and society that we live in now, that could be like really crazy sounding, really mind blowing. But, well, I mean, I guess you could argue that it wasn't back then because women were treated a little better. But if we're talking specifically, if we're going to be honest, if we're talking about the Nordic peoples, they did hold a lot of those patriarchal values that we still have. Not necessarily the superiority of men, but they did hold the patriarchal values, not matriarchal values, like the Celts did. So, the idea that we have the king of the gods, arguably the most powerful being in the Nordic universe, learning from a woman, and a stranger, no less, a woman who's not from your own kin, is an extremely powerful metaphor for the ancient Nordic people, and I think even for us today. To learn from a woman or from a person that you would deem an outsider, untrustworthy, beneath you, strange, to learn from someone like that. Wow, my southern accent just came out really strong there. I heard it myself. I was like, whoa. But anyway, to learn from someone like that, it just shows you again that he's such a god of humbleness, of respect, of humility. And to show you that he's so unconventionally male in the Nordic sense. He is so very different, which is why Thor actually outshadows him today in Nordic worship, and especially back then. Odin wasn't actually worshipped widely like the other gods. There weren't tons of Odinic priests running around. Not at all. Quite to the contrary. There were almost none. So Freya was being his first teacher. She taught him charms and spellcasting. But ultimately, his quest for occult wisdom is solitary, and that's true. While he is, like I said, such a wandering god and is open to learning from everyone, he's very much about being self-taught, which I think is also, again, very empowering to us today as witches and shamans and just neo-pagans. Almost all of us are self-taught. And here we have, in history, evidence that that's been going on forever. It's okay to be self-taught. Let's see. Freya whispered to him of the runes and said that they were lost in the misty realm of the Vanir, which are her gods. So we all know the runes. I'm not going to explain the runes because we all know runes, even if you've not used them. But you should if you haven't, because they're really awesome. But so again, we have a woman dispelling this amazing gift to humanity, the runes, this divination system. We have this woman giving knowledge to him, giving knowledge to the king, giving knowledge to a man. We have this mysterious. You could do again comparative mythology here with the Celts. You could say, oh look, we have the goddess Freya, or this earth goddess, this mystery goddess, this figure that is older than the present, giving information to the king. So again, there's always this idea, if we go back in history, that women, even if it's not said out loud, are somewhat more powerful than men in some way. That the universe is female, and that the universe is giving man, in this sense, man, answers and guidance. That men are always being guided by women and by womanly forces and by womanly energy. This is very evident in the myths of Odin. Odin is all about finding his own femininity, which I'll get to. He cross-dresses a lot. He's very much about embracing your womanhood, even if you're a man. He's about embracing women and being a strong woman, and building up your femininity and your womanhood to make you a strong person. He's an extremely feminist god. So, determined to apprehend, comprehend, and master the runes, Odin pierced himself and then hung upside down for 9 days and 9 nights in a shamanic ritual on the world tree. We all know that image. That's usually the hanged man card in the tarot. That's Odin. And I think, there are so many parallels. Every time he gets massive amounts of wisdom, he has to give up a part of himself, like his eye. And then he has to hang upside down, bleeding out for 9 days and nights. The idea, I think, is that knowledge doesn't come cheaply to you, or magic, or what have you. You have to work for knowledge. You can't just come into this world and know everything. You have to go through life. As we grow older, we get more wise. We learn from our mistakes. We learn from other people's mistakes. Life is hard and messy and sometimes really crappy and not worth it, because that's how we gain knowledge. You don't just get it given to you. And when you do, you usually forget it. That's why you have to, that's why at least Odin really urges you to be self-taught and to always, always seek more. He died a shamanic death in order to be reborn as the Rune Master. The tarot card, the Hanged Man, may depict this ritual, not a literal hanging, so that's what I said before. But there is, in shamanism, there is a ritual of death, and it's something that I don't want to say that I do it all the time, but it's something that I do. It is something that I do fairly consistently, in terms, like, I don't do it every day or every month. Like every few years, I will find myself, not consciously usually, but I'll find myself doing a death of the self ritual. I think those are incredibly powerful. Let's see. Odin's curiosity has no bounds, and he refuses to be constrained by boundaries of any kind. Following Baldur's death, Odin went to live amongst the, I think it's Sami. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He refuses to be bound by gender restrictions. See, there you go. Odin is curious and respectful towards what was traditionally considered women's magic. He is not ashamed to learn from women. Freya taught, I don't know how to pronounce this either. It's like Syor, to Odin. Although men historically, this is for real, there really was and is a magical system, a type of paganism that is just for women, called like Syor. And although historically men did not practice this style of prophecy considered woman's art, Odin did learn it from Freya, because he's arguably a very transgendered god, but because he always wants to learn everything he can. When Odin gathers when Odin gathers herbs and roots for healing, he usually dresses as a woman, or is seen as a woman in the midst of that stuff. I think that's very telling too, and something that I've already touched on in the video, so I won't go on for it more and more. As we all know, Loki is the half-brother of Odin. Now, I know if you've seen the Marvel superhero movies, like Thor and the Avengers, you know that Loki is Thor's brother in those. But in the actual mythology, it's Odin, Thor's father, that is the half-brother of Loki. And the reason I say half-brother is because Loki is half frost giant, or Jotun. Let's see. So Odin seems to genuinely enjoy Loki's company, for Odin is also a trickster, although to a much less devilish degree. Um, Although acknowledged as the All-Father and head of the pantheon, Odin was never the most beloved historically. Not by a long shot, she says. Freyr, Freya, Frigga, also known as Frick or Fricka, and especially Thor, were the spirits adored by the masses. And that is true. That is real history. Also, if you noticed, Odin's wife's name is Frigg or Frigga or Frick or Fricka. That's where we get the alternative curse word to the F word. So instead of saying fucking, we can say frickin' or friggin'. And that's just a play on that goddess's name. So you're still taking a god's name in vain. And I just think it's hilarious that across all these cultures and histories and pantheons, we have people using their gods' names as curses. I just think that's hilarious and fascinating. Odin was favored by a specialized crowd, for he is the patron of occultists, shamans, and poets, which were called skalds. Odin had too many associations with death, because he is considered the god of death, if we have to give a label, to be truly beloved. And, you know, we see that through history, too, and through across all cultures. Most cultures. Most cultures do not, while they do have a god or goddess of death, of the dead, they're usually not honored and put up high and praised. They're kind of feared and respected kind of at a distance, much like a deadly animal or, like a deadly animal. You may love bears or sharks or snakes or spiders, but you don't necessarily keep putting yourself in harm's way of those poisonous and deadly animals, right? You respect them and you can enjoy them, but you're not like, yes, let's hang around all the time. Let me decorate my home in you. You know what I mean? You don't really do that. So, let's see. He was once offered large animal and human sacrifices. As a master of the gallows, his sacrificial victims were hung from tree branches. Odin, as a warlord, sponsors elite shamanic warriors, berserkers, wolf shirts, not rank and file soldiers. So very much like soldiers of fortune and assassins and mercenaries. Those are the kinds of people that are sacred to Odin, not traditional soldiers. Whew. I'm going to stop this video for a moment because I've got to take care of something that is being ridiculous, if you can hear it. And I shall return. Okay, I'm back. I had to take a quick little break to settle my cats because they were playing on the staircase being absurd. And you may still hear them, but oh well. They're cats. What are we going to do? So, where did we leave off? So we were talking about Odin as the warlord and the type of people that are sacred to him, what types of fighters. So, half the battlefield's dead spend eternity in his hall, Valhalla. The other half live with Freya, who is the Valkyrie goddess, the goddess of the Valkyries. Odin's dead warriors will fight under his command at the apocalyptic battle of Ragnarok, which is a theme that we do see in a lot of mythology as well, the rising of the dead. Oh, this is kind of grim, but it says that he may specifically choose which soldiers will die in a fight, just so that he can claim them for later to bring back. That's kind of messed up. I think that's definitely just frou-frou stuff that got thrown in there much later by people. So Odin is the divine rider. He rides where he will, all over the earth, but also over the Milky Way, and through the sky, often leading a procession of spirits, ghosts, heroes, and heroines. His passage is signaled by storms and powerful winds. This parade of spirits is known as the Wild Hunt. Odin is the primary wild hunter. Sometimes he will lead the wild hunt alone, sometimes with a female co-leader. In the guise of chief hunter, Odin was sometimes identified with the devil in Christian medieval Europe. I'm not going to expand on the Wild Hunt, actually, because I'll talk about it for a really long time. The Wild Hunt is a concept, usually in Celtic mythology, that is huge and has a lot of significance. It's not just people riding around hunting. It is so much deeper to talk about, but I'm not going to go there because it's just so much to talk about. But you may have also heard that gods like Pan, Hern, Cernunnos, um, sometimes Dionysus, even Bacchus, all these horned gods and wild deities are usually considered members of the Wild Hunt, the Green Man. Anywho, we're not going to talk about the Wild Hunt though, because I'll just go and go and go with that. So, Odin bestows wealth and success when he chooses, much like every god, right? He will help find missing treasure, much like a lot of spirits. He can heal virtually any disorder or illness, again, if he chooses. The whole "again if he chooses" statement she made, I think, sums up a section of what Odin is, especially in my experiences. Odin only does things by choice. You can't really go to Odin, in my experience, and be like, hey, will you help me do this? Will you help me with this spell? Will you help me with this dream? Hey, will you help me get this into my life? Help me get rid of this. You don't really do that with Odin. He comes to you and says, hey, let me help you with this. It's really not the other way around. Okay. Let's see. Odin is extremely generous to those he loves and considers his friends. So, kind of what I just touched on. But terrible, merciless, and vindictive towards his enemies. That's very true. I have had situations where a person has wronged me, and it was very obvious that I was wronged. I mean, it wasn't like up for debate. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, let's review the board of morals and ethics. Like, I think virtually anyone would say that this person was in the wrong. And, I was just going to go on with my life. Be like, okay, whatever, fine, F you. And, but something happened to them that was fairly obvious that it was either the Morrigan or Odin, if you catch my drift. Talking about ravens here. But something happened to them involving ravens that was really weird and dangerous. It was horrible. It hurt them. And they came back to me and they were like, this is your fault. This was something messed up, because they weren't pagan. So they were like, this is something that you did and it's shame on you. And I was like, it wasn't me, but I think I know who it was. So yeah, he will definitely watch out for his own and watch out for himself. Oh, okay, so she rehashes a lot in this, saying that he adores writers and poets and novelists and people who are artsy, basically. And I don't know why she brings it up so much, but she does. I guess she just really wants to get the point across because she too is a writer. But yes, Odin is just such a patron of art, dance, music, any form of art, expression of the emotional self. That is Odin. So yeah, he loves travelers and traders too, because, he's a wandering person. He likes to trade information for more information. She also puts that his favorite people are the LGBT community, and that's a little bit of a stretch, but I wouldn't blanket the whole community as being sacred to Odin just because they're LGBT, although I would do that with other gods. But I do think that Odin does have a loving arm extended to the LGBT community, because he has so many aspects of himself that are LGBT, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, if you aren't familiar with that. So then she goes into his manifestation, which I'm not going to read because, again, I just basically described him earlier by saying Gandalf. That's not how I see him, though. I usually see him as a little younger, not quite old, just a little younger, like on the other side of being middle-aged, really. And I usually picture him in black armor, which is strange for me because I usually don't see war gods in black, because that's typically what everyone says they're in. But I actually do see Odin in like a shiny onyx kind of armor. And thus, because of that, I think that's why I always see myself in armor when I'm working with him. I made a video quite a little while back now about Odin coming to me when I had basically become emotionally numb. And he taught me to love again, taught me to be compassionate and to love myself and to be open to love, which was the most important thing. And he taught me to use gemstones, which is obviously super impactful on me because my name is Gem Warrior. I get that from Odin, and of course Morgan, but Odin taught me what it was to be a gem warrior, which was to be a warrior who uses gemstones as for suits of armor, like spiritual armor. So rather than just carrying around a piece of amethyst with me to ward off negative energy, in my real life, I have a visualization that I do where I picture myself putting on a suit of armor made out of amethyst, and of course ruby for love, and etc. 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 So Odin's awesome, and since he is a god of magic and knowledge, much like the Lady of the Lake, where I talked about she does magic that is unconventional or not seen in our books and in the mainstream. Odin is very much the same way. He teaches me things that I don't read in a book from Llewellyn, or from other major pagan publishers. He teaches me things that are very much just passed down knowledge. So much like the Morgan, they pretty much have the same animals that are sacred to them, like ravens and wolves, sometimes cattle, things like that. Tarot images of the Hanged Man and the Magician are usually representative of Odin. Let's see. Oh yeah, Wednesday. The day Wednesday is named after Woden's Day, which later became pronounced Wednesday. If you're into correspondences and things like that, good days to work with Odin or Odinic magic, or Odinic energy would be on a Wednesday, and his numbers that are sacred to him are 3 and 9. Wolves, snakes, bears, horses, blah, 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 all these animals that he loves. She gets a little rambly at the end, so I'm kind of just breezing through it. Specifically, while all the runes are really sacred to Odin, there are 2 that are very specific to him, and those are Gar and Ansuz. So, there are a lot of plants that are associated with Odin, more so than animals. He has a lot of power plants, much like people have power animals or totem animals. He has totem plants. He really does. And those are the juniper, which in German the folk name for it is Wotan's Rod. So, but juniper, elfwort, I don't know the common name for this. She puts the Latin names in here for some reason. But elfwort, juniper, and something called the Amanita muscaria, and I don't know the normal name for that. I apologize. Monk's hood, which is also called Odin's hat. And then there's a herb called Wotan's herb, which scientific name is like Heliotropium europaeum. So a flower, really. But in Iceland, the 12 days of Christmas are called Odin's Yule Host. I think that's pretty neat. And she has a whole paragraph about offerings, but I that's a whole nother topic for me too, like the wild hunt that I won't go into. But anywho, that's her stuff about Odin, and I know I interjected a little bit, primarily about him giving me the gemstone idea and all that, and becoming Gem Warrior. But I just wanted to share that. I know that was very lengthy as a video, but that's what she has to say about Odin. And I must say that I agree with most of it, and that's why I really skipped at the end. I was kind of like, okay, we're just trying to fill up pages in our book here by writing this. Come on. So as much as I love this book, I can't critique it. But yes, Odin. I think you can definitely seek out Odin if you want to work with him. But I think that he very much won't come to you, and you won't truly work with him until he wants you to. So, but that shouldn't stop you from going and seeking him out and learning about his mysteries. Because he may be already calling to you and you don't know it. Anywho, guys, that's a little bit about Odhinn. He is very, very, I think, different from what we're told he is, or what we're presented with in mainstream media. Odhinn is a very, very feminine god, and not the overly masculine, crazed Viking, old dude. That's not Odhinn. It's not my Odhinn. Anywho, I thought you would enjoy that. I hope you did. I enjoyed it, but that was a lot of talking, and now I'm really tired. That took a lot of energy out of me. This is why I've been like slowly slouching out of the camera. Should have poured a bigger glass of tea. Anywho, that's it, you guys. I hope wherever you are, you're well. And as always, namaste and ashe. Peace out, Girl Scout.